Hello there, this is All 24 Midnight World News program coming to you live from Algiers. Next are today's headlines. Representatives of more than 35 parliaments and parliament speakers participate in the proceedings of the 17th Conference of Parliamentary Union of the OIC member states. Also coming up, voters in Tunisia choose among 262 candidates in second-round parliamentary elections. A young Palestinian was killed by Zionist occupation on Sunday east of a West Bank settlement, also ahead in our news. Coming up next as well, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacks the Conservative Party chairman Nadeem Zahawi for a serious breach of the ministerial code. Hello again, those were today's top stories. Welcome to the program. To the details now. First, in our topical news, the proceedings of the 17th Conference of the Union of Councils of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation kicked off on Sunday afternoon in Algiers. Representatives of more than 35 parliaments, including 22 parliament speakers, are participating in the conference, which is organized by the Algerian parliament under the theme of Islamic world and the changes or the challenges of modernization and development. This meeting aims to come up with decisions and recommendations that serve the Islamic nation and to push the organization to be a strong defender of the Islamic peoples through international forums.
The current session of the conference is being held in a historical period where the world is witnessing extremely complicated developments, and this needs a serious work of parliaments that meets the hopes of the peoples, for whom we're privileged to represent and defend their rights for justice, peace and development, and providing chances for a proper life in a just international state. The participation of the members as it is for 15 years, despite the unprecedented rise of rates of inflation. For this I call all the member parliaments who need to catch up and respond for the correspondence of the Union to find a solution, knowing that those who paid the participations during 2022 are only 21 councils out of 54.
On the occasion, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune addressed a message to the participants in the proceedings of the 17th session of the Councils of OIC Member States Conference read this message on his behalf by the chairman of Lower House of Parliament, Ibrahim Boughali. President Tebboune called for mobilizing more financial and political support for the Palestinian people, doubling efforts to stand in the face of hostility and hatred against Muslims, and also recommend creating a committee to contribute to resolving conflicts in the Islamic world. Let's take a listen.
We call for doubling efforts to mobilize more political and financial support to enable the Palestinian people to stand firm in the face of the systematic and widespread crimes they are exposed to, especially in the light of the intransigence of the Israeli occupation and the continuation of its grave violations, the latest of which is the violation of the sanctities of Al-Aqsa Mosque. The manifestations of hostility and hatred against Muslims, which have caused an increase in discrimination, vilification and exclusion, require doubling efforts and diligence to find civilized formulas by which we confront systematic discrimination and feelings of anti-Islam, hatred and intolerance.
And in the same context, and for his part, Speaker of the Jordanian Parliament, Ahmed Safadi, who is participating in the proceedings of the 7th session of the Conference of the Federation of Councils of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, praised Algeria's remarkable and supportive role for just causes, mainly the Palestinian cause, which is the pivotal cause during the current period regarding the last hostilities and clashes with the Zionist forces.
Algeria is always privileged with a very important file, which is freedom and against any colonialism. So we salute the glorious Algerian people who sacrificed 1.5 million of martyrs for the freedom of the next generations that we see today in front of us. So thanks to every Algerian woman who gave birth to a martyr.
As participants in the 17th session of this conference, President of the Andean Parliament and Colombian Senator Gloria Flores called for overcoming the colonial situation in Western Sahara, defending Sahrawi's right to self-determination, underlining that the right is recognized in Latin America.
Sí, tenemos problemas todavía.
In the 21st century, we're still facing major challenges and problems embodied in the colonial situation in the Latin American region and in Africa. We must overcome the situation and guarantee people's rights to regain their land, culture, independence and sovereignty. This is an endeavor that we all share in the region. Many countries in Latin America support the Sahrawi people and their right to self-determination. Andean community countries, Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador and Peru, these four countries recognize the Sahrawi Arab Republic and establish normal diplomatic relations with the country.
Other participating delegations, such as the Malay Parliament spokesman and the Somali Parliament chairman, also emphasized the centrality of the Palestinian cause, and the conference give it great importance, especially in the light of the developments that are taking place recently.
Well, Palestine has been a struggle for long. And certainly Malaysia has been championing issues for a long time ago. We believe that the Palestinians have the right to coexist with Israel, and I believe the Jews and Christians in Palestine feel the same thing too, because Israelis do not differentiate Muslims and Jews and Christians in Palestine.
The issue of Palestine was among the important issues that we as the Republic of Somalia raised and emphasized on, that the issue of Palestine will be based on Islamic foundations, and God willing we will support this, and it will be among the decisions that we will talk about in the Somali Parliament.
A young Palestinian was killed by Zionist occupation on Sunday east of West Bank settlement. In the meantime, settlers carried out a series of attacks on Palestinian cities and homes, stormed the town of Ramallah, and burned down a Palestinian house and vehicles. This comes as the Palestinian Foreign Ministry described the Netanyahu government's punitive actions against Palestinians as collective racist sanctions, instigating further escalation. A rise in violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and East al-Quds is feared following Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to make it easier for Zionists to acquire firearms. Meanwhile, world leaders have called for calm and denounced the violence against Palestinian people. More details with Osama Ayadi in this report.
Following the dangerous hostilities which took place during the wake of the New Year between Palestinian resistance and the occupying forces of the Zionist entity, international community started calling for the escalation of the situation between the two parties.
We call on both parties to do everything possible to de-escalate the situation and restart the security coordination which is vital to prevent further violent acts.
The European Union and many Arab and non-Arab countries expressed their concern over the situation in the country and emphasized on the need to de-escalate the heightened tension, affirming that the recent Zionist crimes are just one more sign of the violent attitude of the occupiers against Palestinians. International community in general stressed on making more efforts for the resumption of dialogue between resistance and the Zionist occupiers to guarantee a comprehensive, just and lasting resolution for the Palestinian cause.
We condemn all terrorist attacks targeting civilians and oppose excessive use of force.
The Zionist leadership, on the other hand, did not consider international calls for easing the situation on Palestinians, and rather it further tightened its grip on the Palestinian civilians. Netanyahu's government decided to loosen gun laws, allowing the occupation settlers to carry guns and enhancing the number of soldiers in addition to loosening restrictions on killing civilians, mainly in the West Bank. In response to the measures, Palestinian Foreign Ministry showed a total refusal, considering it a violation of international agreements. It called on the U.S. for concrete reaction against the Zionist continuous assault and demanded justice and establishing mechanism to curb the unilateral measures that will lead only to more hostilities.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in the Middle East on Sunday for a three-day visit beginning with Egypt. After his stop in Cairo, Blinken's next stop will be Palestine as part of his tour in the region amid surging of violence by Zionist occupation against Palestinians in the West Bank. Iran and the war in Ukraine also take part of Blinken's agenda. The heads of the Italian oil group Eni and the National Oil Corporation in Libya signed a historic agreement to develop 2 gas fields off the coast of Libya. The agreement described as a historic step towards long and fruitful cooperation. The report is signed by Zahra Frajani.
Italian energy company Eni and Libya's National Oil Corporation signed an $8 billion gas production deal aimed at boosting energy supplies to Europe, an agreement described as a historic step towards long cooperation in the African continent.
Thanks to the Green Stream pipeline, we share an essential tool to promote the process of diversification of energy supplies. The signing of the deal between Eni and the National Oil Corporation of Libya is an important historic step in the long and fruitful cooperation.
With Eni, we have the Buri projects, which are offshore oil fields. Once an agreement and development are reached, they can produce more than 50 or 60,000 barrels, in addition to the onshore areas in which an agreement was signed. And all of these are included in the exploratory drilling program soon.
The project will allow Libya to raise gas production in the short term by about 2 billion cubic meters, starting from 2026, and open the way for the new international contracts expected in a country that has the largest proven gas reserves in Africa.
The agreement we signed today is historic and will allow making major investments in the energy sector, creating jobs in Libya and strengthening the position of Eni, which is currently the first operator in Libya as it handles the production of 80% of Libyan gas. The agreement will also allow meeting most of the Libyan needs, provided that a third of the energy of the 2 fields is exported to Italy.
Italy aims to secure new gas supplies from the southern shore of the Mediterranean from this deal, with the purpose of restoring activity to the energy sector in Libya after a decade of political and security crisis that has ravaged its economy.
On Sunday, Tunisia opened polling stations for run-outs in parliamentary election that drew only 11% turnout in the first round last month. An outcome critics of the president said undermined his claims of public support for sweeping political change. With political parties boycotting the vote, most candidates are independents, and attention is likely to focus on whether there will be higher participation there than it was in December.
The new parliament may or may not change the situation, but Tunisian citizens must change their thinking. Tunisian citizens must be responsible and active, not only ask the government to do everything. Tunisian citizens must take the initiative and uphold their duties.
People must vote, otherwise we will go back to before July 25th. We couldn't wait for this day to come after Tunisia was put on the right track.
Thousands of Burkinabe people on Saturday demonstrated in Ouagadougou, demanding the withdrawal of French forces from Burkina Faso. Demonstrators supporting the transitional authorities chanted slogans denouncing France's policies in Africa. France received on Tuesday the request from the Burkina Faso military transitional government to withdraw its troops deployed in the country and respect the required 1-month deadline.
Let them understand that the hour has come. We're 18 years old, and we're adults and vaccinated. We have understood who we are, what we have and what we can do. We have decided to take our destiny into our own hands, and it's not the international community or anyone else that's going to stop us.
Bomb-carrying drones targeted an Iranian defense factory in the central city of Isfahan overnight, authorities said early Sunday, causing some damage at the plant amid heightened regional and international tensions engulfing the Islamic Republic. 2 of the drones were successfully shut down. A third apparently made it through to strike the building, causing minor damage to its roof and wounding nobody. To the latest of the Russia-Ukraine file, Germany, Scholz denounces betting war over jets for Ukraine. Chancellor's comments follow repeated requests by Ukrainian politicians for fighter aircraft after battle tanks were pledged for the war against Russia. The German leader also said he will continue to phone Russian President Vladimir Putin, stressing the importance of maintaining an open channel of communication in order to find an end to Russia's war on Ukraine.
Andriy Melnik, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine, and Ukrainian President Zelensky have praised Germany for dozens of its Tornado fighter jets and pleaded with other nations to join a fighter jet coalition for their nation.
The enemy does not count personnel and, despite numerous casualties, keeps intensity of its attacks high. In some of its wars, Russia had suffered fewer losses than it faced here, particularly near Bakhmut, and this can only be countered by extraordinary resilience and a complete awareness that our soldiers are defending the whole of Ukraine when they defend the Donetsk region.
In response, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has once more resisted calls for fighter jets from Germany and Ukrainian authorities to fend off Russia's military operation, pleading with Western countries not to engage in a bidding war for high-tech weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin was last reached by phone at the beginning of December. At the time, the Russian president referred to the German and Western positions on Ukraine as destructive, and he urged Berlin to reconsider its strategy. This last week's German leader pledged to keep calling Vladimir Putin, highlighting the significance of keeping lines of communication open in order to put an end to Russia's conflict with Ukraine.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Sunday discussed security and the Ukrainian conflict with South Korea's foreign minister in Seoul. He explained that, quote, North Korea is providing military support to the Russian war efforts with rockets and missiles, and this is just or highlights how we are interconnected, end quote.
We also know that our security is more and more interconnected. We are, of course, concerned about the reckless missile tests and the nuclear programs of North Korea, and the war in Ukraine has also ramifications for your region. And we also know that North Korea is providing military support to the Russian war efforts with rockets and missiles, and this just highlights how we are interconnected.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak vowed to pressure on Sunday by firing the Conservative Party chairman Nadhim Zahawi for a serious breach of the ministerial code, following days of criticism over his personal tax arrangement. Here's Islam Said.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has fired the head of the Conservative Party, Nadhim Zahawi, after an independent probe over serious breach of ministerial code related to his tax fraud.
Following the completion of the independent advisor's investigation, the findings of which he has shared with us both, it is clear that there has been a serious breach of the ministerial code. As a result, I have informed you of my decision to remove you from your position in His Majesty's government.
Sunak claimed that the government's independent standards advisor had looked into the party chairman's financial dealings before reaching its conclusion. On the other hand, chair of the Labour Party criticized the Prime Minister for not acting earlier.
Didn't act earlier, what he knew about this situation, and why he seems to be continuously putting the interests of his party above those of his country. He knew there were allegations about Zahawi for a long time.
The investigation into his affairs by the UK's tax office focused on the selling of about £27 million in YouGov shares, a polling website founded by Zahawi himself. The latter admitted to having a disagreement with tax authorities, but claimed his mistake was careless and not deliberate.
Well, I was really pleased, to tell you the truth. I think he should have resigned when it all came out. I think he's making us, I don't know, he doesn't lead by example. It's just like...
No, that's right. Pressure had been building on him amid allegations he settled a multi-million-dollar unpaid tax bill while he headed the country's treasury. The probe began in April 2021, but Zahawi did not declare it when he was named to be in charge of Treasury. More than a year later, Zahawi's removal occurs simultaneously with challenges that face Sunak government, including inflation and public strikes, which might negatively impact opinion polls ahead of the 2024 election.
Slovakia's President Zuzana Kaptova congratulated her future Czech counterpart Petr Pavel at his campaign headquarters on Saturday after winning the Czech presidential election. Kaptova said Pavel's win was the victory of hope, saying it showed decency and honesty was not a weakness, but a strength in politics.
I understand that there are some who are disappointed because their favorite candidate did not win. But I also see that in this country, we do not have winning or losing voters. I see that values won in this election. Values such as truth, dignity, respect and humility.
The Algerian Red Crescent supervised on Sunday the shipment of 180 tons of various food products provided by Algeria as aid to Cuba. The aid represented in basic food products such as table oil and sugar in order to meet the needs of families. The initiative aims to provide assistance to the Cuban people going through difficult times following the considerable damage caused at the end of last December by the violent hurricane classified Category 3 by meteorological specialists. A man in Peru's capital Lima died on Saturday and others were hospitalized as nationwide clashes between protesters and police continued in the 8th week of the South American country's political crisis. Here's the report of Salman Nasib.
Peruvians have been taking to the streets since early December when former President Pedro Castillo was impeached after a failed attempt to dissolve Congress. 57 people have died in connection with the unrest, and 45 of the deaths occurred during direct clashes between protesters and police. Insisting that demonstrations are violent and financed by drug trafficking rings and illegal miners, police fired tear gas in Peru's capital to disperse crowds of anti-government protesters who were throwing stones and setting off fireworks.
We are in charge of deactivating the tear gas canisters that they throw, and we save the lives of many people because we grab the canisters and put it into the water with baking soda to neutralize it.
A general lack of protective gear has also led protesters to have serious injuries by the widespread use of less lethal weapons. It's worth mentioning that according to a non-profit organization, from January 19 to 24, Doctors Without Borders treated 73 patients at the Lima protests, suffering from exposure to tear gas, pellet wounds, and psychological distress.
We've been transferring the wounded to the hospital, to the health posts. We come from Juliaca to support the ones in Lima, to give first aid to the wounded.
On Saturday, President Dina Boluarte expressed regret after Congress refused to speed up the timeline for a presidential election, since the demonstrators insist on demanding her resignation, as well as the rapid holding of new general elections.
At least 3 people have been killed and 4 were wounded in a shooting in LA's Beverly Crest neighborhood. The shooting took place in the morning and the victims were found in a car. 2 of the wounded individuals are in critical conditions, while the other 2 are in a stable one. The incident comes after a recent back-to-back mass shooting in California. A gunman killed 11 people in dance hall in Monterey Park near Los Angeles, and 7 people were shot dead in the coastal Northern California city of Half Moon Bay 2 days later.
Around 2:30 this morning, West LA officers received multiple 911 calls of a shooting with people down at a residence here in the 2700 block of Ellison Drive. When the officers arrived to the scene, they found 5 victims suffering from gunshot wounds. The Los Angeles Fire Department responded and pronounced 3 of those victims deceased here at scene. 2 of those victims were transported to local hospitals, with a total of 4 victims that were transported to hospitals. The ones that were transported, we have 2 in critical condition at this time and 2 in stable condition.
For more stories making headlines around the world, here's the news in brief.
At least 10 children were killed, 7 were injured, and around 8 others were still missing after a boat carrying religious school students capsized in northwest Pakistan. Another accident occurred south of the country when a bus fell into a ravine and caught fire, killing more than 40 people on board.
On Tuesday, the South Asian nation announced a new energy conservation plan as the economy continues to face multiple challenges because of the differences with the International Monetary Fund over a review process, which has delayed the release of $1.1 billion bailout tranche. Therefore, the government has ordered all markets to close by 8:30 p.m.
A 5.9 magnitude earthquake killed 3 people and injured 816 others in Iran. Rescue teams rushed to the area shortly afterwards, while Red Crescent has set up 18 temporary shelters and heating devices were distributed to people. The specialized police unit that included at least some of the Memphis officers involved in the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols was disbanded on Saturday as more protests were planned in U.S. cities. A day after harrowing video of the attack was released. In Memphis, protesters cheered loudly when they learned of disbandment of Scorpion and angrily catacoled a police car that was monitoring the march, with several making obscene gestures.
Novak Djokovic captures his 10th Australian Open men's singles. Well, that's it. For more news, visit our social media platforms. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.